МАРК ГОЛУБ in Encyclopedia of Russian America. Mark, we have 15 minutes and we have you for that 15 minutes. Please introduce us to your life.
Well, I was born on May 10th, 1945, which of course is the day upon which the then Soviet Union declared victory over Germany. I was born on that day, May 10th, 1945, in New York City to Leo and Rebecca Golub. My father was in dental school and was in the United States Navy. And I was first brought to a home on Central Park West, overlooking beautiful Central Park in Manhattan. I grew up there for about 4 years until my brother David was born. Both of us stayed in New York. We moved to a different apartment. And then when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my father enlisted in the Public Health Service during the Korean War. And he was stationed in the Groton submarine base in Connecticut. We moved to Groton, lived in Niantic, lived in Danbury, Connecticut, where my father served in the Public Health Service, and then ultimately moved to Trumbull, Connecticut. And I grew up in high school in Trumbull. From there, went to Columbia College in New York City. From there, went to the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion to become a rabbi. And I always did two things, two passions. One passion was media. I loved radio. I loved television. Always have. And the other thing that I loved was the Jewish tradition. My home was very Jewish. My family was very Jewish. And I was very lucky because unlike most American Jews, my entire family had different strains of Judaism to it. There was Orthodoxy, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, and I grew up understanding that there is no one way to be a Jew, that there was this marvelous umbrella called the Jewish tradition, and I fell in love with it. So I had the love of Judaism and the love of media. And when I finished my rabbinical school education,
What year?
1972, I went to work for WMCA Radio, which was the first telephone talk station in New York City and was the leading telephone talk station in the country. And I became the editorial director and the director of public affairs for WMCA. And for 7 years, I was the editorial director of a major New York City station that was a major editorial voice throughout America. It was an extraordinary education for me. I learned all about professional talk radio. I had my own talk shows. I became the #1 substitute talk show when the stars would go on vacation, and it was a wonderful time for me. And when, in fact, that ended, I blended my two loves, Judaism and radio, electronic media, and created an organization called Jewish Education in Media to produce for the Jewish community programming for the Jewish community that had the sound of contemporary American radio, talk radio. And that program was called L'Chaim, and it began on the first Sunday of February in 1979, as we do this right now, this conversation. L'Chaim has never missed a Sunday from 1979 till today. But what's interesting for me is that it seemed like all of my experience, as if my entire life was preparing me for one critical decision. In 1990, my congregation, with Jewish synagogues all over America, helped bring Jewish immigrants from the former Soviet Union into America as part of Operation Exodus. And my congregation sponsored 2 families, one of which brought over from Chernovtsi a man named Michael Pravin, who came with his family. Michael Provin had been one of the first entrepreneurs under perestroika, Gorbachev's perestroika. And in America, Michael Provin came to me and said, I, Michael Provin, want to create a business for myself here in America. And he would bring me idea after idea. My wife, Ruth, whom I adore, who is my partner in life. We have 2 extraordinary children together, has said yes to any project I've ever wanted to do. Ruth was teaching Michael English, so he was in my home all the time. He saw my work. And one day he came to me and said, you do Jewish television. By then my program L'Chaim was on television. It started on radio, went to television. He said there is no Russian language channel in America. And there's a large immigrant Russian-speaking community in Brooklyn, in Queens, that needs Russian language television. Would you, Mark Golub, be interested in helping me create the first Russian language channel? In English, there's a phrase, due diligence. It means you go into a business proposition by looking at everything you can possibly learn about the field. And I did my due diligence, and I found that Michael was right. There was every kind of ethnic television except Russian language television. And I went to Cablevision, which was the cable company that served Brooklyn at the time. And I said to them, I would like you to give me the opportunity to create the first Russian language channel. And they trusted me. I was not the only person who was asking them for this at the time. But they said yes to me. And they gave me and Michael the opportunity to launch the first Russian language daily channel in the Russian language exclusively on Cablevision in the most single greatest populated area of Russian-speaking community. And so in 1992, 20 years after, 13 years after I had started my own radio program, we launched RTN, the Russian Television Network of America. And it was an instant success. Instant. Far beyond anything I ever dreamed, because the community really needed Russian language television. And what I tried to create was an American channel in the Russian language. I did not try to create a Russian channel. And the styles of RTN were all American. 2 anchors, 2 vedushis. We had a man and a woman. Up until then, if you watched any Russian television, it was always 1 anchor. We did a nightly newscast. We did interviews. We got programs from the former Soviet Union, movies, children's programs, soap operas. And this idea just grew and grew and grew. It began as simple television. It got better and better and better.
I remember that time the anchors were Alexander Gardon and Galina Tot.
You're exactly
Alexander
right.
Gardon, he is very famous now in Russian, on Russia television,
He
on the
is.
first channel.
He got his start with me on RTN, and I'm proud of the fact that Alexander Gordon says that he learned television from Mark Golub. That's a real kick for me. But you're right. I held auditions. People came from all over to be the anchors. And the 2 people I chose, young, good-looking, Gordon was very good in English and in Russian, very bright people, were Alexander Gordon and Galina Todd. Anyway, RTN continued to grow and grow and grow and grow. And I did not understand then that I would build an extraordinary relationship with the audience. That what moved me in many parts was how wonderful the audience was. But it was fun to do television. But it was more than fun. It became something I felt I was doing something meaningful with my life. It had real purpose. And now I can go anywhere in America, maybe anywhere in the world. And if there's a Russian there, they'll know who I am. And they'll stop me, and they'll say hello, and they'll be lovely to me. And I learned something else that's very important, which I now say to Americans. When I say Americans, Russians are Americans too. Russian Americans are Americans. But I'm talking about people who've been here for generations. This country, America, is a unique social experiment. There were Native American Indians living here before Europeans came. But they don't now dominate America. We are dominated by waves of immigrants. Everybody here is an immigrant. The question is not, did your ancestors come from somewhere else? Only when did they come here? And what I learned and understood was the people we were creating RTN for were the epitome of what Americans had been generation after generation. My ancestors, my family, my grandparents are Russian Jews. They came from the Ukraine, Minsk. One of my grandparents came from the very border where one day it was Russia, one day it was Poland, one day it was Russia, one day it was Poland. I'm a Russian Jew. I had an instant link to my audience. I have always felt one with them, and it has given me a sense of obligation. I feel it is not only necessary for me to create a wonderful channel for my audience with as much entertainment as possible. Television is entertainment in the main. It needs good movies, good soap operas, good talk shows, but RTN is also a window into America and the news that's done. Whether it's Morning Run or Contact or Mir Savonia, or whether it's political programs that I do with Yuri Rostov, we bring information to people who might have no other real way of getting sophisticated, intelligent, American-oriented information so that they can feel that they're one with the entire community that they're part of. And part of my goal, whether it's teaching English once a week or doing the politics, is to help my audience
Mark,
become more and more comfortable with and at home in the United States of America.